Hi, my name is Mike Dillard, and this is Self-Made Man, the podcast for those who want to leave their mark on the world and create a legacy of honor, integrity, and achievement in every aspect of your life. I'm glad you're here, and once again, it is time to forge your destiny. As many of you know from listening to this podcast or from the email that I recently sent out this week, I've been dealing with the aftermath of a significant head injury that I suffered back in June. Now, the recovery process that I've had to undertake has required me to completely change my life in many ways, and one of those was with the quote-unquote forced adoption of meditation. So like you, I've always heard about the benefits of meditation, and I've made a few half-hearted attempts to adopt the practice in the past, but those attempts were always short-lived. 5 minutes felt like an eternity to me, and I spent the entire time wondering if I was doing it right. And as I know now, if you're thinking while you're meditating, then you're not actually meditating. But without the device that I'm going to tell you about here today, it makes it almost impossible to really figure out, how to do this correctly. So this injury finally forced me to pursue the practice of meditation as if it were my job. Why? Well, it's because consistent meditation for at least 20 to 30 minutes per day for at least 30 days in a row has been shown to help physically repair the brain. So I had to dive in, but thankfully this time around I found an amazing piece of technology that can teach you how to meditate like a monk. It's called the Muse headset, and today we're joined by the founder of the company and the inventor of the device, Aimone. Now, we're going to obviously dive into the story of how Muse was invented and how it works here in the show, but I'll just say this, it's a game changer. I went from struggling to, again, complete a 5-minute meditation session on my own to now effortlessly meditating every night for 30 to 40 minutes within just a few weeks. So if you're stressed, if you're overworked, if you're dealing with anxiety, depression, or ADD, the Muse headset will absolutely change your life. So without further ado, please help me welcome Aimone. Aimone, welcome to Self-Made Man. I'm super excited to have you on the show today.
Awesome, Mike. Great to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been looking forward to this because you invented a device that I've been using almost daily for probably 6 months now. And I've owned it longer than that, but about 6 months ago, I really finally got in the habit of using Muse, which is the device that you invented. And so I'm a super fan, and I'm super excited to have you on the show to talk about your story and how you came up with the idea for Muse and brought it to life. So if you wouldn't mind, I'm sure there's some people out there who are listening to this who don't know what we're talking about, don't know what Muse is. Let's start back at the very beginning and give a brief overview of what the device is and then what your inspiration was to create it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really interested and excited to hear about your own experience. So for those who don't know, Muse is a brain sensing device that helps people learn how to meditate. So meditation, as many are discovering these days, is an excellent way to help to find a greater sense of balance in your life. It's great to help you find a greater clarity in your thoughts, in your mind, and also to find a different kind of focus in anything that you do. So it has like many incredible benefits, but can be extremely challenging to practice, even though when you scratch the surface is actually an extremely simple method. But it turns out there are a lot of places where you can go wrong. And so Muse, in many ways, was created as a learning and teaching tool to help people discover the practice of meditation and to take their first steps and develop practice in a way that you can be quite confident that you were not wasting your time at it, and rather practicing in a way that was really going to produce results.
Yeah, I mean I'm one of those typical people who, ADD entrepreneur, and I've always heard about the benefits of meditation. A couple of years ago, probably gave it a shot or two and just, laid down in a quiet place and tried to calm my thoughts. But I really just didn't know if I was doing it right. I didn't know how to quiet my mind. And so you just give up, and your sense of time when you're starting to meditate in the beginning seems to be really off, where 5 minutes goes by and it feels like you've been there for 20.
It can be excruciating, can't it?
Yeah. And so I just never got into it. I basically gave up, and I was just like, I'm just not meant to do this. And then I actually had a head injury about 6 months ago that really affected my ability to focus and sleep. And Muse was the first thing that I turned to. And luckily I had the device, and I really just, okay, I'm going to use this every single day. I need to use it now almost as a medical device, basically. And just started. And I love the fact that you guys it essentially pairs with your iPhone with an app, and the entire thing is guided. And you guys take people through the beginner's journey basically over the course of 1 to 2 weeks. And each session gets a little bit longer. Each session has a different focal point. And you've essentially gamified it. So instead of me telling the story, though, I'll let you jump in, because what you've basically created is a device that gives the user feedback that says, yes, you're doing this right. You're doing what you need to do to get into a meditative state. And it gives you feedback in real time so that you can learn it. It's kind of like training wheels, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, actually, like similar to you, there was just not too long ago, I took a spill off an incredibly high slack line, and ended up with my first concussion. So it was really interesting going through the process of trying to find that inner balance again when everything is thrown out of whack. It's pretty scary. So I'm really happy that Muse provided an anchor that could help you through that. So for those who maybe haven't tried meditation, there are many different techniques, but in very many of these techniques, the primary practice is cultivating a particular kind of awareness, and the practice often has an anchor that you would focus your mind upon. And so the most common one is to focus on your breathing. And when you focus on an internal sensation in the body, the patterns of activity that your brain produces actually are quite a bit different. And I think it's interesting to think of the brain as having kind of two different modes of consciousness, you could even say. One of them is a type of mind where we are constantly time traveling. We're going to the past and we're traveling to the future. And this is the mind where we're telling stories. Often it's called the narrative mind. But when you tap into a sensation, like your breath, what you're actually doing is you are tapping into the real-time flow of information that is coming from your senses. And meditation is the practice of refining your ability to do that. And that's why you hear people say, just be present or be in the now. And what they mean is to be present with the sensations you're experiencing from your senses at this very moment. And that's interesting and important because if you consider, part of being able to act successfully in life is to be able to understand what's happening right now in as much, detail that you can capture, so that you can, whatever it is you're trying to do, you're going to have some plan about where you're trying to go, what you're trying to achieve. And if you know what's happening in the moment, you can make a much better strategy for how to go forward. Whereas if you kind of misinterpret what's happening, you're really not present. It's like being in a conversation and not truly listening to what the other person is saying. You'll find yourself encountering a lot of resistance. So being present is really just being present with what's happening right now around you, so you can be tuned in. And when it comes to taking action, you can really capitalize on that knowledge and really go with the flow. So it turns out that we spend an awful lot of our time in this mode of narrative thinking. And people call it the monkey mind. In neuroscience, they call it the default mode because we happen to hang out there most of the time. And so, any adaptive system, whatever it is you do a lot of, you kind of get stuck there. So we kind of get stuck in this mode of narrative thinking, the real-time autobiographical storytelling experience. And to step out of that and into present moment experience, where we actually take in new information, becomes extraordinarily hard to do. So meditation, you could see as being developing the skill and the capacity to step out of that narrative and into the uncertain, mysterious world that you're interpreting through your senses, in this very moment.
So walk people through how the device and the app actually work and what the experience is like.
So, the way a Muse experience looks is you have a very simple headband, and you wear it. It kind of tucks behind your ears and it goes across your forehead. And there are various points on that band that pick up the electrical signals that your brain produces from the electric field that is sensed on your skin. So it's not something that does anything to you, but rather reads the electrical activity your brain produces naturally. And then what we're doing is we're reading the fluctuations in those signals over time, and interpret from those signals something about the state of mind or state of consciousness that you're currently in. And what you notice when you look at brainwaves is when you're sort of tapped into an experience like the breath, which is a natural kind of wave-like phenomena, and you can really settle upon it and, really allow your experience to settle to, that place where all you're experiencing is the breath, then the brainwaves become quite harmonic. It's like, being in an ocean where there's a swell, but there's not a lot of chop. And then when you switch into this narrative mode of thinking, or you could even just say thinking, this process of jumping around in time, going from thought to thought, produces much more chaotic activity in the brainwaves that we read. And so you go from this like gentle ocean swell to something where there's a lot of chop. And the Muse algorithms that run on your smartphone, so you'd pair the device to your smartphone or your tablet, they look at those signals that are being produced and they recognize those shifts. So the shift to and from being with a very harmonious, continuous wave-like experience and moving into the more chaotic dynamics of thinking. And as you're engaging in a meditation practice, which is a simple practice of focusing on your breathing somewhere in your body, when you switch these into these different modes of mind, you'll receive different kinds of auditory feedback that you'd receive through headphones. And the metaphor that we like to use is the weather. So when your mind is busy, then you have chaotic, stormy weather. When the mind becomes focused on a sensation, the weather calms down and, it's like the clouds break and the birds come out. So you'll actually hear birds if you stay in a calm and focused state for an extended period of time.
Yeah, and that's the really cool part is the gamification where you're getting real-time feedback so that you can make adjustments, and then you get to the point where you hear birds chirp and you're like, oh, okay, this is what it feels like to be in a meditative, state in that brainwave level. And that is the training wheels that makes this whole thing work, and it's just been awesome. And as I've gotten better and better at it, usually my sessions I'll do 35 to 40 minutes each night, and I've now turned essentially off the birds, or almost off, but you can change the volume levels of the feedback that you want, which thank you for making that a feature, because once you figure out how this works, you don't need as much feedback.
Absolutely.
And you it can actually be distracting at some point. So I've turned mine down almost all the way, and it's been great. So what I would love to know is what inspired you to come up with this device, and kind of what's your background as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So I think the process of invention is always mysterious and chaotic. So I would like to say I had this vision one day and knew what we were going to make, but it was actually a lot more of a process. And when we actually happened upon sort of myself and my business partners, when we actually understood what Muse could be as a meditation training tool or training aid, it was, like the stars lining up, and there was this massive release of energy. Like, of course, this is exactly what we were supposed to make. But we did spend quite a long time basically, throwing stuff against the wall and trying to understand the the true value that a technology like this would have for somebody. And so we'd actually been working with brain sensing technology for quite a long time. I first was introduced to the technology around, I think, 1999, and spent years working with it as an sort of joint technology with a wearable computer. So I was very interested in what cybernetic technology sort of had in store for, the human organism. And, if there was a way to use technology to have a much more symbiotic relationship where the human being could be more human, and technology was there to deal with this very highly informatic, distracting world that we lived in. But it was interesting. I had my own sort of research path that was sort of based in academics, and I connected with my co-founders, Ariel and Trevor, and we started creating interactive experiences based around biosignal and brainwave interactions. And it honestly started almost like an artist would start, and just letting our passion flow and build things that we were dreaming about. But what we discovered in that journey is something very interesting about what happened when someone was first introduced to this technology and were first able to get direct feedback from something inside of themselves that they may not have yet a direct sense of. And brainwaves specifically were so interesting because you could find connection, but you couldn't. You had this problem of actually grasping and saying, "Oh, that's exactly what this thing is." I know it, I understand it now, and I can move on. But rather, it continued to pose new questions. So when you'd connect your alpha waves to this, slider that would go up and down and would make a light get brighter or dimmer. It seems very simple, but what changes the level of alpha activity in your brain? Well, there's many things. And to test the system, what you had to do is you had to allow yourself to move into different states of awareness, different states of consciousness, and have a mindfulness to appreciate and test the result of that experiment. So it's like a self-experimentation. And so whenever you'd, take a device and you put it on someone and you say, okay, here's what this thing does, here are some strategies, go ahead and see what you think. What would always happen is you'd see someone go into this very deep introspective experience where they would start exploring their inner world and then starting to do this experimental process where they would say, okay, I'm feeling this, what's it saying about me? Okay, I'm feeling that, now what is it saying about me? And it was like going on an inner journey to try to discover something about, a component that was revealed through technology. And so seeing that engagement is something that really inspired us. And from there, we went on this extremely long journey to try to understand the value of such a process. And so we really started out trying to build just interesting experiences where someone could control something with their mind. And we teach people strategies to affect their inner state, make your brainwaves change, and thus control something in the physical world. So one of the highlights was something we did for the Olympics in 2010. They were in Vancouver, and we had people in Vancouver controlling, the lighting on Niagara Falls and the CN Tower in Toronto using their brains from afar. And super wild experience, like totally inspiring. But we still, like, even from that, it was like, there's something that we're missing here. We've made it like a very interesting experience for someone. It was totally larger than life, but, it still didn't really, connect with the potency that we found in this. And I had never heard about meditation at the time. And I remember, continuing to go through an exploration where plugging away at different possibilities. Is it brain training? Is it like control a robot? Is it play a video game? Is it a cognitive training tool? Like, what does this want to be? And I remember someone asking me, Chris, you've been working this a long time. Like, what do you think there is here? What's that killer app experience? If this is going to be something big, what is it? And I remember, considering this, and I was like, well, one thing is really interesting to me, and that is, for so many years, I've continued to be fascinated about exploring with this technology. And what I realized was the thing that kept me curious was that inner exploration, because I was always learning new things about myself in the process. And so I was like, I wish I could just package up the journey. And this journey of exploration and tuning in and learning more about yourself and developing different kinds of inner self mastery. And it was around that very same time that someone came to me and said, hey, have you thought about using this for meditation? And I was just like, oh, that's interesting. We can help people just, relax and chill out. That was my basis of understanding of meditation. And he suggested that, maybe I should, go in and take a closer look. And I remember opening my first real book in meditation, and it was one of those moments where you're just like, I can't believe no one told me about this. It's like, this is what I've been working on my entire life. And humans have spent thousands of years going super, super deep. So it was kind of like opening Pandora's box. And in some ways, the rest is history, because it was like all the pieces fell into place. And we were building a tool that really helped people look within, develop awareness, cultivate new skills, to really go on that journey to walk the path of awakening to something bigger within themselves.
Now, did you guys launch this with a crowdfund?
So we did an Indiegogo campaign.
I thought so. I thought I remembered that.
Yeah, fairly early. And this was before we knew that what we were building was a meditation training tool. But where that really came from was we knew we wanted to create experiences where someone could use their mind in different ways with technology directly. And we couldn't find any piece of hardware on the market or nearly on the market that allowed it to be an accessible experience. So either you were in an uber expensive research realm that was extremely difficult to use, uncomfortable, or you were in a sort of almost toy-like realm where you had very low dimensionality, very low quality, and there was really nothing that could really open up the potency of the technology and also, could be comfortable, cool, and, you could go and buy it at Best Buy and then come home and learn how to do it on your own. And so we ended up, realizing that we had to make our own piece of hardware to make this work. And that's where the hardware that we know as Muse was born. Really just came from our desire to really, take that understanding of this potency and make it available, and realizing that we had to provide that first stepping stone for people to be able to do that.
Did you guys have to go raise some funding to bring this to life? Because I know developing a really refined, ready to go to market tech product is not an inexpensive endeavor.
Yeah, so we definitely had to raise money, and that was a whole journey in itself. And I think beyond that, perhaps an even larger obstacle was, none of us had considered making a hardware product before. And, it's one thing, building a, one-off installation that was built by hand. And it's another thing entirely to, design something that, could be affordable, to set up manufacturing, to build relationships overseas, like all the things that you need to do to manufacture and distribute and manage like a physical product was just all new to us. So, that was a super daunting task. And it was, all I can say is you just, trust that you can do it, and you know what you want to do, and you just put one foot in front of the other, because you're just simply walking out into the unknown.
Yeah, I've been there for sure. Well, y'all obviously did a great job. The device works really well. The app is super easy to use and intuitive. The UI is fantastic. One question, actually, before I get to that, you guys in the last week or two announced the release of Muse 2. So your second generation device is now on sale and is going to be shipping here soon. I already ordered mine. What's different about Muse 2?
Well, there's a bunch of new things. We're super excited about where we're going with it. So you sort of on the surface level, it looks very similar to the first Muse. We found that we actually worked for a lot of years on the Muse design, and still to this day, I'm astounded by how successful it is in fitting so many people. We are all shaped very differently. And so to make a product that can fit conformally to the head like the Muse does is extraordinarily tricky. And the nature of EEG, which is the brain sensing technology, unless you have, fairly firm, consistent, and large surface area contacts from the electrodes to the skin, it's extremely difficult to measure the signal. So I think most people are familiar with a heart rate monitor that would go around your chest. It has these big, large electrodes, and there's a strap that holds it tight against your skin. But the heart signal is like 1,000 times bigger than brain waves. And so the brain signal is very subtle indeed. And so the fit is just one of these things that has to be absolutely perfect, which either means you clamp something to the skin or it has to fit like a glove. And so we really wanted to, not rock the boat and change something that actually has worked so remarkably well. And so it looks almost exactly the same. It's a lot smaller now. So there's these sort of pods that go behind the ear that house the electronics that are quite a bit smaller now. But the other thing that we added that's visible is a pulse oximeter, PPG. So it now measures your heart activity as well and has the capability, when we have time to go there, looking at the oxygen content as well. But this now allows in one device to do both heart and brain. And there are some very interesting interactions between the heart and the brain, as you might imagine. So putting these two sensors together was like super exciting. It's the heart sensors on the headband along with the brain sensors. And so it's very, even quite hard to see it. It's very small. And it uses light. So it passes light into the skin and it receives what comes back, much like an Apple Watch. And we also added some pretty amazing motion processing algorithms. So it measures also the head movement. And our head moves a lot, even when you're meditating. We can read your heartbeat through the head movement. We could read your breath. And we can obviously read the postural changes that happen in the body, while you sit. So the idea that kind of came behind all of this is we found that Muse as a training tool, asks you to look into your mind and to calm your mental activity. And you get direct feedback about what's happening there. And the challenge we found was most of us have quite busy brains. And if you're not able to calm your mind, with whatever technique or capability you have, it can be extremely frustrating. And so we found that a lot of users were having trouble taking those first few steps because their mind was just too busy. And that, reality combined with, really honoring that if you look at meditation training, if you were to work with a teacher, what you'd find in a meditation class is, they would start with how to sit. And you'd work on sitting in a way where your body can be in an alert posture and very, very relaxed. And you're asked to sit without fidgeting or moving very much, just letting everything settle. And you're also taught how to breathe. So you'll be taken through different kinds of techniques for breathing. And then you learn different techniques of actually tuning into the body and the emotional body to really see what's happening. And you really kind of work with these, let's say, more physical aspects. And you really work on, in a voluntary way, calming these components, these parts of you down. And that really provides the foundation for a more calm and tranquil mind. So in so many ways, the mind responds to the body. And so by calming the body down, you effectively calm the mind down. And so our intention was to really open up 3 new gateways in the experience to allow someone to approach these different dimensions of a meditation practice. All of these things actually, reinforce each other. Obviously, we're integrated beings. So there's now a body-based meditation experience where you get feedback on the subtle movements of your body while you sit. There's now a breath-based experience where you can be introduced to different styles of breathing. And by following guidance, you can improve your skill by matching your breath to a guide and then getting feedback about, what your heart and body coherence with that guide is like. And then there's also a heart based experience where you get direct feedback from your heart's activity. And so there's these three different components that are added to the fundamental mind experience that allows you to expand your awareness, develop techniques to work with these different aspects, and then ultimately integrate them in practice to provide a much better foundation for calming and focusing the mind.
Very cool. Well, I can't wait till mine arrives. And totally random question for you. Do you know if it's possible to use the device in a float tank?
You know what? So I did make a Muse for a float tank. And I'm sorry to say that the current Muse will not work in a float tank. It's not waterproof.
Okay.
But the signal processing in a float tank is actually different because the salt water is conductive.
Right.
So what's interesting, if you actually look at the signal you get from the brain sensors, you actually often you get your heart, your EKG signal blasting through as well because it's conducted through the water. So you can absolutely do it. And so I've had some fun personally about experimenting there, but it might be some time before we have a float Muse coming to the market.
So I'm going for my first session here this weekend.
Oh man, I'm excited for you.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard nothing but great stuff about it, and I was like, oh, that would be a really interesting combo. So I had to ask. Yeah.
I think, floating is one of these, fantastic technologies because you have an opportunity now to release yourself from so much physical sensation that you can go into what just feels like a waking dream. But one of the challenges is you're lying in a float tank just with yourself, for at least an hour. And for some people, that can be quite an uncomfortable place to be. And what I realized through my own experience is that the techniques you learn by having a meditation practice and the familiarity with calming the mind and having techniques to do that are super useful because it allows you to settle things to the point where you can now start to open up to this more of a dreamlike experience.
Yeah,
and so
for sure,
I'd say that Muse is a fantastic training for floating, right. If you can imagine that.
Yeah, no, I absolutely believe that for sure. And then one other question I had for you. So you've got in the app, I just go for straight sound at this point, as far as the guided stuff goes, but y'all actually have, tracking of all of your stats. So again, the whole gamification piece is built into this. But you've also got guided sessions as well. It looks like 4 different ones here to choose from. You did one with Deepak and a couple of other people. I wanted to ask you if you have any plans to expand this library, because I would love to be able to pay you guys $3, $4, $5 for guided meditation sessions that are more akin to, or at least incorporate like NLP. So some kind of repetitive positive affirmation type of exercises and statements that can be brought into the experience. And you could do it for, 100 different topics, challenges, ailments, goals, desires, whatever it may be, right? That I think would just be super powerful and that I would love to pay for and be happy to pay for. So from a business model standpoint, I think that would be pretty big for you guys.
Yeah, it's really great to hear you say that. And you'll be happy to hear that is coming very, very soon.
Cool.
So this summer, we acquired another company who are now we already feel like family. And they produced an app called Meditation Studio, which is available in the App Store. And it's an absolutely fantastic guided meditation app that has a many teachers model. And so, you can check it out. They have fantastic content, but together we are working on a combined product, which brings in, the best of guidance to work with the Muse meditation and to really open up the possibilities that come with having more teaching, more training, more guidance along with the Muse experience. And so we're really excited about that. That's coming very, very soon. And it's also very cool to hear you talk about, having things that can help you reinforce qualities or ideas when one's in a state of meditation, it's like your heart is wide open, and it's an amazing time to drop in intention and anything you want to bring into your life, because it's like you can speak directly to your subconscious in some way.
Exactly.
So I think that's very, very cool. It's awesome to hear you talk about that. And I'll definitely pass those thoughts back to the team. They'll love to hear it.
Yeah. And even, I mean, just from an entrepreneurial business standpoint, I've got to imagine that being in the hardware business is pretty tough, because you've got, a solid cost of goods sold, and being that it's a really well-built hardware device, it's not necessarily meant to be replaced. Someone could use their device for 3, 4, 5+ years, and there's no other revenue stream from that. So obviously having some kind of recurring revenue stream that's brought into the business will be really big for you guys.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, one thing I love about this is it allows you also to stream things according to people's interest. So on one hand, you want to make an extremely simple product that makes it easy to get into, you're not confusing people. And then based upon your interest, you can select, into different streams that allow you to dive deeper into something. And so, I love the sort of, SaaS model, to provide a means to offer like different depths of experience based upon, what the interest is, without kind of like, the biohacker is going to want, tons of charts and graphs and stats. Whereas, someone who is, just feeling, very stressed, or has, some emotion that they're trying to deal with, they're going to want to have something which is really all about, the guidance of a teacher and really feeling supported. So I think it's really great to have a way to kind of stream things like that. And I think this kind of model where you can subscribe is awesome for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Muse 2 is available for order now. As of the time of this, I know you guys are kind of shipping in 1 to 2 months.
Yep.
And I think it's a bargain, $250 for the device, guys. Or it looks like $250, right?
It's $299 in Canada.
Okay, cool, awesome. So what's next? What's the big vision for you guys 5-10 years from now? Do you have any skunk works, like different types of devices maybe on the whiteboard somewhere that?
Yeah. I mean, we do. I mean, one thing that I'm personally pretty excited about is virtual reality. That's definitely one of those things which is on the horizon. It's coming, like it or not, And if you've spent any time in VR, there's definitely something there. I mean, even if we can't figure out how to use it right now, there is an immersivity and like a potency and a power that is undeniable. So I'm personally extremely excited about what that might have to offer for personal development and growth. I think there's the therapeutic potential of VR is massive. And I think, whether it be to, become better at something, to really open up to some quality you'd love to nurture in yourself, or it's to work through things that are ailing you, I think that there's like tremendous potential for it. So that's something that I'm extremely excited to continue to push into and to explore, because there's something there.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. Future, the next 10 years is just going to be nuts from a technology standpoint when it comes to biofeedback and the amount of data that is going to be available to you at your fingertips between you guys and Oura Ring and the Apple Watch. Like, it's just getting started. These are all basically Gen 1, now Gen 2 devices. 10 years from now, it's going to be just absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting time. And I think with any new technology that, we keep creating things that are more and more powerful. And, there's these things are going to be used in whatever way people are attracted to. And so it's, I feel for myself, it's sort of a moral imperative to figure out how to use these different technologies in a way that, really helps us come into a better balance with ourselves and the world, and to, move towards a happier, sustainable state. So, that's where my heart and passion is.
Yeah. Awesome. Are you guys, and I'm asking this selfishly, are y'all raising any capital, or do you have any rounds open at some point?
I think we'll be looking at some point in the near future. Yeah, get in touch and we can talk about it for sure.
Cool. Awesome. Very cool. Well, Chris, this has been a fascinating interview. Thank you so much for your time today. Again, obviously a super fan of what you guys are doing, and I'm very excited about what's in store for the future. So thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story. And guys, I would highly recommend that you go pick up a Muse headset for yourself. If you're the typical ADD entrepreneur as I am and you have a hard time shutting your brain down, this was meant for you. It's exactly what you've been looking for when it comes to learning how to meditate. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate you listening as always, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Time to shine just like a diamond. When life is rough and I ain't with that funny stuff, I use it all as motivation, but it's hard to have the patience. Watching time fly by might be the hardest thing I have to do in life. Frustrated that I ain't where I want to be yet, but I know that I'ma make it if I chase that check. Yes.
Cause I done seen the time go by for too many years now when the stars were aligned. Cause I done seen the time go by. Yeah, I done seen the time go by.
I've been waiting all my life, and it was right before my eyes. Watching all this time slip by, now I realize I've been waiting all my life, and it was right before my eyes. Watching all this time slip by, now I realize. You know I've been waiting.
Please help me.